All right, and we are back for another episode of Influencer Profits. I am incredibly excited for today's guest. I have been following this guy. He has inspired me on multiple occasions for multiple years. We have Chris Hawk Jones here with us. If you don't know who this guy is, you're about to get your mind absolutely blown. He has absolute power, motivation. He's just like on a mission to really inspire and impact people. He's been on stages with people like Gary Vee. He's founded tech companies. He's had massive success online and in the online industry. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing everything. As you were talking before the podcast, I'm like, gosh, I just want to press record right now because just what you're saying is, it's just incredible, your journey and what you've gone through and the impact that you're making. So appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
For sure.
You're welcome.
So go ahead. Do you want to start?
Yeah. So Chris, I mean, we've known each other for a while, and you've been doing big things like since I've been on the interweb, and so explain like how you got started. I know a little bit of it, but our listeners probably don't. So explain how you got started, and then how did that lead into like what you're doing now?
Oh, that's a big story. You need a longer podcast for that story.
I know.
It's interesting. I was speaking a few months ago, and I was telling people, I was like, I'm the most unlikely person to ever make $1 million. Like, I was not supposed to be here or do this. And, I was the kid in high school. I mean, I got bullied a lot. I wasn't super athletic. I was a state swimmer, so I could swim. I could move through the water, but I couldn't do anything with a ball, a board, forget about it. And so, in school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I had these heroes in my life that were so strong. I mean, I had a great father, great family. And post high school, I wasn't the college type. I didn't feel like education was kind of my path. So I was like, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. That was the thing. I was a great swimmer, whatever. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So I actually snuck into Coronado, into Bud's camp when I was 16. I live in Minnesota, so I flew to San Diego, and this is pre-9/11. I don't think you can do that these days.
I know.
Homeland Security would get you. But, and I remember sneaking in with my old man, and we snuck into Bud's, and we're walking around, where the Navy SEALs are training, and we weren't supposed to be there. And it's, of all the places you're going to sneak into, it's not the wisest place to go. Yeah, it was nuts. But I remember, the guy stopped us and asked us what we were doing and explained, my dad explained, hey, my son wants to be a Navy SEAL. And so the Master Chief pulls us into the room, and I'll never forget like the death stare that guy gave me. And it wasn't to discourage me, but it's like, if you're a serious kid, like, this is what you need to do. And this was before like everything has been documented on the History Channel and the internet and the Jocko podcast, right? Like, I just wanted to be great at something, and I wanted to be an elite warrior. I just had this in me because I was looking up to the Arnolds and the Schwarzenegger, the Van Dammes of the day. And so that was my path. And it turns out I trained to be a SEAL, never ended up becoming one, ended up moving to Thailand and being a kickboxer of all things. I come from a step family that comes from Thailand, so I grew up with that. And so I became a competitive kickboxer out in Southeast Asia, and had no idea I was going to start a business or ever become an entrepreneur. But, after doing that for a couple of years, you realize you can't really do that when you're 50. It's not the greatest life. A fighter's life is not a comfortable one. And so I moved back, went to college, applied for the University of Minnesota. I wanted to get in the FBI. So I studied criminology and law, did that until 9/11 hit. And that kind of threw things through ringer. And so I got a job offer from Homeland right after, while I was in college actually. And so I dropped out to take that job. And I was like, man, this is my foot in the door. I'm gonna go work for Homeland. And it was kind of my way to the FBI. So anyways, so I did that for a couple years, and then realized the government wasn't my thing. Like, I was like, oh, thank goodness, right? Like, I learned this quickly. And so dropped everything, moved to Miami, you guys, and became a financial broker of all things, because I wanted to work with successful people. I didn't really know how success worked. I didn't know how life worked. I didn't know how wealth worked. And so I started, learning sales. It was a very boiler room operation in Boca Raton, Florida. And that taught me a lot of things. And most importantly, it taught me how to talk to people that were higher than I, like more successful. and it gave me confidence. And, you know, I did pretty well, did very well actually in my early 20s, but I just hated the person I had become just because of, I mean, that's that space, you know, the financial markets and all that. So I dropped everything and got rid of every condo, sports car, moved back to Minnesota and started over. I was like, if I'm gonna work this hard, I'm gonna do it for myself, not knowing what I was gonna do. And I ended up moving back in with my parents, tried to start a business, went the network marketing route. I think a lot of us know. And I was really good at it. Because I was fearless. I was like a machine. I wasn't afraid to talk to people. And so, you know, I live in the Midwest, and in Minnesota, I was like, man, what's my angle? I was always trying to find these angles, right? How can I stand out? And I knew like there's all these farmers in these communities, and farmers talk to other farmers, and nobody was driving out to the sticks to talk to these people. And so the company I was with, you know, had this most ridiculous product. It was sex chocolate. Yeah. I was selling sex
chocolate to farmers.
To farmers. Hey, they have babies. You ever see how many babies farmers have?
That is, and
yeah.
You doubled the amount of babies they had.
Winner. Libido, chocolate. That's all the company had. And I don't know how I got sold on that deal, but it was genius in the way. So I ended up driving like hours out in the middle of nowhere to these farmers. And I bring like this presentation and these DVDs, right? And they didn't even own television. So I was like, you know, but they were so entrepreneurial. They knew business, they knew margin, and so they loved the concept. Nobody had ever presented, so it was like it was like Christopher Columbus, like discovering new land, you know. And I got one farmer, and they all told their friends. And before you know it, everybody's eating the sex chocolate, and I'm making this money. And like I taprooted that market, and it was pretty cool. Unfortunately, it was impossible to like train them and keep up with them because they were all so spread out. And I wasn't part of that community. So it was difficult, and the company ended up going by the wayside and whatever. But that was kind of my introduction into entrepreneurship, was sex chocolate and farmers.
That's hilarious. I've never heard that story.
Never heard that either.
I've never told that story very, very much, but
that's so funny. I thank you for sharing that here.
Humbly, I will tell you that story. But you know, it also like I learned how to pound the pavement. You know, I went from like phone sales, working as a broker, to pounding the pavement. Like I used to park blocks away just because I was driving this piece of crap car, and you know, I had to step up and be this leader. And so that taught me a lot of things. But I discovered the internet during that time. I was like, man, I saw these kids making, and this is back in 2004, 2005. And I saw these guys on video on the internet, and I'm like, I can do that. And they were selling digital products, right? Like this is like the digital products inception. And so I was like, I'm going to do that. And I made like 11 grand the first month. I'm like, I didn't do anything. You know, I discovered Google pay-per-click back then, which is kind of like how Facebook has been last few years. And so it was like printing money, you guys. Like it was digital product. It was an education product of sorts. I don't even remember what it was. And I made like 11 grand the first month, made like 27,000 second month, and then hit 6 figures a month right after that. And it was right, made my first $1 million on Google. And that was like, that's where I learned leverage. That's where I learned, wow, I could use video, my personality to present an offer, to present my, you know, my story. And so I became a storyteller essentially. And everything's history after that. You know, I went off to, learn and hone in my skills. I mean, we met when I owned iPass, I believe. Is that right?
Yep, totally.
Yep. And how that came about, you guys, funny because I was an affiliate marketer by trade, I guess you would call it, right? And so I would build sales systems before there was ever a ClickFunnels or any funnel, anything. I would literally code and try to like piece together these archaic funnels. And they converted. They did so well that the parent companies I was doing that for wanted to buy them from me. And so it kind of became the commerce that I was known for. And so these sales and marketing systems, and of course the lifeblood of those systems, however, was my personality, was the video, right? And so a lot of times I was selling myself into that, if that makes sense.
Totally.
It wasn't just a system. It was like me going along with it. And so, you know, I got known for that. And then I built that monster system iPass for that other company that we were with, Power Network, and it exploded, you know, over 200 million in sales, just phenomenal. Definitely a an artery that was hit with that one. And I got a lot of attention for that. But I'll tell you what, you guys, like, it's crazy, like all that success. Like I was at the top of the mountain at that point in time. This is back in 04, 05, no, 15, 2015, 2016. But I wasn't happy. I was from the outside looking in, everybody looking at me were like, oh, he's got everything. I had like perfect family, all this money, the success, right? Like everything. I was miserable. And even I didn't quite realize it or understood why. And so that was like the big kind of turning point for me, was when I sold that company and kind of left and went on to do new things.
Wow, that's crazy, dude. I never heard your sex chocolate, so I did hear your.
I'm thinking like from sex chocolate to Google millionaire, like that's got to be like a part of.
Yeah, that could be a good hook for something.
Right.
But no, I remember hearing your story. I think you told it on stage once, where you were right when the whole economical downturn hit, and your boss told you to go in and sell the person more. More of whatever that they just took this huge down, and they told you, and then you're like, screw this, I'm out. And that was really strong for me. I really appreciate that. So.
Yeah, it's interesting in life. We have these turning points, these 90-degree turns. I'm sure you guys have experienced them, where you just pull a 180 basically, and you just turn and you do something different. You take a risk. And in that space, I was a broker. And it wasn't an economic turn. It was just the markets changed a bit. And one of my clients, it was as a risky investment. It was, I think, heating oil futures at the time, super volatile. And it went south, and he lost his money. And my boss like, hey, you got to ask him for more money. I said, I can't do that. He's like, well, there's the door. That's what we do here. And I chose to walk out the door. Best decision I ever made. And same thing when I sold iPass. Like, I needed to take another turn because I knew I had the skill and the talent to change things. And I had a problem with the 90% failure rate in entrepreneurship and really the space over time. I have a complete problem with that. I think there is an epidemic failure happening that really prevents us from seeing what is really going on. And it causes some major lifestyle problems. And we're not really seeing it yet because the economy is good here, especially in the US. But when it changes, we will see the impact of the status over structure situation, where we put so much emphasis on being an entrepreneur and we don't account for real performance values. We look at like the promise of a better life, the promise of great results, but what really dictates that? And so like, man, when I sold my company, I started to go out there and try to figure out how can I fix even 1%, even 0.5%, 0.25% of what's going on, right? Of the 400 million entrepreneurs in this world. That was kind of my mission.
So can we talk about that, like past and that whole thing? What about now? Like, what does a day look like now? Like, what's been the turning point for you? Because you did come across the turning point. So can we talk a little bit about that turning point and what you're doing now and how that kind of created it all for you now?
Sure. So yeah, when I sold my previous company about 3 years ago, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to have more purpose. Money always came easy to me. I was always good. I could rely on skill and talent. And so I started a technology company. I mentioned that to you guys previously, Bioptics, which is still in development, which is amazing. It's just a passion project. I wanted to feel like Tony Stark every morning. That's just how I just, like I get my mind on stuff and I'll just do it. And I don't really care what happens sometimes. And I just wanted to work on stuff that I thought was cool, and not really with any regard to, is it going to make money? And I built a mobile app called Trove, which is phenomenal. Spent a lot of money on that. That's still out there in development. And it was to fix the social commerce problem. And so I was solving all these problems. I kept I don't know, for some reason, when I got out of the business opportunity world, the affiliate marketing space, my mind just exploded open with all these concepts and ideas, and I couldn't keep up with it actually. So I just started building what I could, and I went out to raise money, and that was where my biggest challenge came. And you guys, it was like, I come from the world where I self-fund everything. Like I just launch a company, make some money, reinvest that capital and grow the company. I didn't want to do that this time because I couldn't do it. It was too expensive. Like I was bleeding cash. Technology will crush you if you're not prepared. It is so expensive, especially in something like augmented reality. It's ridiculous. So, you know, I mean, that was challenging for me. So I went out there and started pitching VCs, you know, these hedge fund managers. You know, I was working with James Altucher a bit, you know, over those couple of years, and it was amazing because he's so successful in the financial markets. And I also knew them, so it was cool. And, you know, you guys, I had a lot of interest. People were very intrigued about Bioptx. They're very intrigued about Trove. They're very intrigued about Generation Hero, which is my stance in the entrepreneurial world. So I had these huge 3 companies I was building, right? It's nuts. You got to be mad to do what I was doing. And so I started a shell called Element 99, and this was like the main umbrella company. And I went to raise money for that so that it could fund all those 3 projects. And had a sweet deal come across my plate, and this is completely a learning lesson for me. You know, I had this offer come to me for a good chunk of money based on the valuation of this company, and a lot of stock. It was a public company, and I was thinking in my head, and I let this. I became too romantic about the idea, and it hurt me real bad in the long term. And here's why: is I had such a good offer come across the table. It was like enough money to build anything, and stock that would set me up for life. It was like hundreds of millions of dollars in stock. It was like I knew how to build communities. I knew how to build interest and stories. Now that I had like public stock behind it, I knew I could get people on board with this, and that solved every problem. So completely became romantic about that idea. But the company that I had signed a contract with, they were going through audits, filing their Qs and their Ks as a public company needs to do. They had just acquired an aerospace company prior to me, and so they were going through this massive audit with these government contracts. It was just ridiculous. And they couldn't get it done. And so I was waiting and waiting and waiting for capital to come in. It's like, oh yeah, it'll come in next month, next week, next month, next week. It was just years of that. You guys, 2.5 years, wow. Right? And I was so romantic about it because it was such a good, perceivably, it was such a good contract that I just let it handicap my progress. I let it hold me back instead of moving on. It was like I just became overly patient. Like Gary Vaynerchuk talks about patience, like patience punched me in the face, right? And I was bleeding money. Like I didn't want to go back to what I was doing, you guys. Like most people would say, oh, I won't go back and, you know, you can make tons of money doing what you're doing and you can consult these companies. I knew if I did that, I would get sucked back in. You guys know what I mean by that? Like,
totally.
Absolutely.
1,000,000%.
I wasn't okay with it, and I wasn't going to fall down that trap again because I knew that the money would come and populate, all that would be back. I didn't want to do it because at that time I was hitting crisis, and I had never saw this for myself in a million years. You know, I had all this money. I was at the top of the world. I started over. I was so excited about doing the things I was doing, and everything was going great. But then the funding didn't come through. I became very obsessed about making this work as I normally do, right? Like we work so hard and so passionately. It's our blood. It's our sweat. And, you know, losing money really affected me mentally. I was working with James, so that was cool. But other than that, that was pretty much it. I didn't want to just launch a course. Like I had a problem with this because I knew it didn't solve the problem. The 30%, you know, completion rate for digital courses was not good enough for me. I wasn't going to spend all this time and sell a course for $1,000 because I could sell a course for $1,000, right? Like I need to solve the problem. So I didn't allow myself the luxury of falling back on that. So here I am struggling, and family fell apart, lost my family, didn't work out anymore, couldn't even go to the gym. Like I would drive to the gym every day because that's been my life forever. And I would sit in the parking lot for 2 hours, trying to get my mind right. And then I drive home. I couldn't even like get myself to walk into the gym, right? And like I hadn't felt a win in a long time. So mentally, like I was experiencing this failure every single day. And man, I just went down a rabbit hole that it really affected me when one day my 7-year-old son, actually he was 6 at the time, he says to me, he says, Dad, I want to do what you do. I want to be I don't know how he says entrepreneur, but you can imagine how a 6-year-old says that word. And he said it, and it crushed me, you guys. I was like, I never want him to have to go through what I've gone through. And it made me realize how important this mission was, is because there's nobody out there really teaching you how to live as an entrepreneur. right? And teach you how to make money and to market and to build brands and like all that stuff. But how do you live between these extremes of your personal life and professional? I had lost my perfect family, perceivably, right? Gone. Health gone. Confidence gone. Money gone. Friends gone. Everybody walked out. Just about everybody walked out. And so here I was in this big house by myself, and it was between like a mouse and a gun. Like, that's how bad it was. And that's what grew the I Am Worthy project. That's what grew Generation Hero. And I was like, if I don't do my job, later on people will die, because it's hard, right? And it gets harder. And so I knew if I didn't do this thing right, man, I had to succeed. And it was that pressure that kept me going. And man, I just kept pushing and pushing. And finally I cut away the investor situation. I said, I'm going to do it myself. I don't need you. I can't handle this false promise anymore. And so I went out there and started focusing on building my concept of what I call lifestyle dynamics. And you guys, I remember coming home and electricity I had to crawl through the window of my house because I couldn't even get in the house because the garage door wouldn't go up, and I remember, the $1 million ring I got from iPass, from that company, right? I didn't have enough money for gas or groceries, so I had to go to the pawn shop and pawn off that $1 million ring, or the Millionaire Club ring. It was such it was, I don't know how to explain the feeling I had. I didn't feel shame. I was sad, but I was with my son, right? And I was like, son, we got to go to the store, and he didn't, he didn't know. And I went to the pawn shop and showed them this millionaire ring, and they looked at me like, you're a millionaire, why are you pawning off a ring? I'm like, no, I was that, right? And I have to do this just to make money. And I was okay with telling them. I had no shame, right? Like, I had no ego about it, because I knew where I was going. I knew what I had to do. And I had to feed my kid. I had to keep the electricity on in the house, And I took cold showers for a couple months, you guys. Like, I knew it was like no heat, no gas. And I let myself do it. When I could have shut that off at any time. I could have taken deals or gone out and consulted businesses and made money like that. I had 3 different high 6- and 7-figure offers on the table that people wanted me to go work for their company. And I told them all no, while I was taking cold showers and had money issues, because I had to do my job, and fight through this. Because if I couldn't do it, how can I expect somebody else to do it, And that was really the mission behind Generation Hero and the I'm Worthy project. And had I not seen that or felt that, I would never have thought to create what I've created. So
it's interesting. The people we are attracting on this podcast, I want to say about 50% of them have gone through some sort of depression, PST, entrepreneurial PSTD, some sort of burnout of some sort, and and maybe the other people have, but they just it didn't come up on the show. It just seems like so much of that is happening. And it's interesting that you had Gary on, because I feel like him and like a Grant Cardone are like pushing that hustle and like grind it out mentality. And I believe that is part of, because they see, and I know Gary gives the things like, you don't have to do this. It's not your life. It's what I choose. And I believe there's a lot of people out there that follow him down that hole and go through that like hustle burnout and the grind my face on the wheel, like for my business,
and then lose their family and end up losing it all.
Yeah. And then what?
Like, I'm in tears because I've experienced a lot of loss too, and you're something, as we're going down this, I believe that every dark experience that we go through is probably one of the most empowering, powerful experiences that we can go through, and that there's breakthrough in every single inch of the darkness, and that every single part of it is used for something in one way or another, and be able, whether it's like, if we can just make an impact to one entrepreneur, because you never know who that one is, who's going to go out there and then make more, and like that ripple effect. Because I know that's what you've done, like you did for me. We never even really talked before, I don't think. But then, I had an absolute burnout, like absolute burnout. I like down to my health, like when it like lost it all, like didn't even know I had memories, lost it all. And, you came out and you had that project and that campaign and you spoke life into me. And every single morning I did champion, like I have my champion training to this morning, like champion training is what I do. And so I think it's really powerful. So let's talk about some wins that came from that darkness.
Well, I'm sitting here because of it. And I'm so blessed to be in this position to have people around. Like previous to this, I've had a lot of friends and, however many followers on social media. It was always like exciting to me, but I've come to value like the people that have stuck around for the right reasons. I've seen things through new eyes, I guess you could call it. But yeah, I mean, when I started to just let go, and here was the problem with me is this was new for me. I wasn't teaching marketing or business mechanics like I had been doing for the last 16 years, right? I was very good at what I did, and I still tend to kind of fall back on that sometimes because I really enjoy building companies and product. I love innovation. I absolutely love it. But at the same time, now I'm dealing with a different animal, and so it's difficult. But when I let go of that fear, you guys, it was all fear, because think about it, right? Like you're at the top of the mountain, and all these people you've helped start a business or get through what they've got through, like, we've talked and however have impacted other people's lives. It's not easy for me when I had to start over, when I lost everything, to go out there and be like, hey guys, I have a problem. Like, I'm here now. Can you help me? Can I talk to you about this? No, it's not easy. Like, it's not the community that exists out there, especially on social media. Like, nobody knew because I didn't talk about it, because it was very uncomfortable. Vulnerability was, I wished I was starting from scratch because there was no expectation. There was no, preconceived of like who I used to be. And that killed me. And so I had to let that go. And the biggest win I had was being able to let that go. And the only way I was able to do that was to just talk to strangers, like to just get my voice back. And so I would talk to, I was doing, as I was building the I Am Worthy project, it was just like, I'm going to go speak to different entrepreneurs, different organizations, charities, et cetera, to talk about this journey so I can get comfortable with it. It was kind of a selfish thing too, because I needed to break out again and be comfortable with where I was at. I knew where I was going. I knew where I'm going to get. I knew everything, but I had to be comfortable with the current state. Otherwise, like, you fall into your shell and you close the door and you don't, And the Gary thing, when I knew I wanted to talk with Gary because I knew he had reach, and I knew deep down, I knew what Gary stood for. Like, he talks about the hustle and the grind, right? And I get it. Like, people need work ethic, right? There is a big part of his market that has a work ethic problem.
Totally.
Right. But at the same time, he talks about empathy, and he does talk about, certain concepts. And he's like the biggest contradiction, and he'll tell you that. It's funny. But he does it for impact. And when I did the event, the I Am Worthy event with him and Stationary Astronaut, it was amazing because I had just got the world's heaviest hammer. And so, for people that don't know, I built the world's heaviest hammer as a symbol for people to get around, saying that you're good enough, right? So in Generation Hero, it's all about being the hero in your life. I had to do that in my life. And as I was a kid, I grew up with heroes. It was a big thing. I always thought I was
Tony Stark thing.
No.
Like,
But back to
yeah.
the hammer, just to be clear, this is not a ball pin hammer with a claw on it. This is a Thor hammer that is freaking badass.
It's the Mjolnir hammer.
Yeah, I didn't know how to pronounce that, but I just see it written, so I didn't want to try to say it. But anyways, that's what's going on. I can actually see it in the corner. That's so awesome. Like, obviously.
Yeah, and that's crazy there, guys. Like, that story is just bananas, because I was like, okay, I'm building the I Am Worthy project. Because I knew the first problem I had to solve was the internal problem of saying that you're good enough to take the first step, right? A lot of times we jump over that, saying most people, we assume that they feel that way, but they don't. And so we go right into the how do you do something. And I knew I had to attack to break or to fight cultural apathy, right? And to get through their heads says, you are good enough. You're good enough to be a father, you're good enough to build a business, to be a millionaire, whatever you want, you are good enough. And so that message was so strong. I was like, what symbol? And of course, Thor's hammer, you got to be worthy to lift the Thor hammer. And I was like, okay, I could do this. And so I was having a whiskey one night. I'm like, I'm going to build the real Thor hammer. And I went to YouTube, and people had made some out of lead, and there's one guy who made an electromagnet version, right? And I was like, that's not real. Like, I need the world's heaviest hammer. So I actually called Guinness Book of World Records to find out what criteria were. Nobody had ever applied for the world's heaviest hammer. So I was like, I got this. And I'm like a Guinness fiend. I love Guinness beer. So I was like, these are my guys. And so I started. Same company, yep. You didn't know that?
I never knew that, no.
I didn't know that, no.
All right, lesson for your clients is think about that. Is they're so smart. They own the beer, the brewery first, Guinness beer, their stout beer, and then they came up with Guinness World Records, so people would talk about, things in the bar, and as they were talking subconsciously, right, like Guinness, Guinness, and you're like, give me a Guinness, right? And it grew to be this big phenom.
That's right.
Super crazy. I didn't know either until a few years ago, and it's just genius. But so anyway, I remember going onto Google. I went onto every website I could and looked up tungsten, or I looked up different metals. I didn't know what to make it. I was like, well, if we make it out of gold, that's heavy, and that would be like almost $3 million. Not possible. Yeah, it's funny. I said that on stage with Gary. He's like, well, it's possible for me. I could do that. I'm like, rubbing my head. I'm like, of course you say. And so, as I was looking, I was like, what can we make it out of? I didn't know anything about metals, and tungsten came up. And tungsten is also very expensive, and it's one of the most dense materials on Earth. And so I started looking into that and got price quotes. It's going to be like anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 to build this hammer, just a material cost. I didn't even know who would build the thing yet. So I started calling around and finding out. I looked overseas in China because that's where it's mined primarily, and found a bunch of manufacturers there that mine tungsten, but still is so expensive, and the tariffs were pretty nasty. So anyways, I remember I was like, I can't afford it. Like, this is crazy risk. And I did find somebody on Etsy that creates like movie props and stuff that would actually make it if I could get the tungsten. So I was like one step closer. And it was one night, I remember I emailed every tungsten manufacturer in the U.S. With an email saying, hey, would you like to support this initiative against entrepreneurial suicide, mental health, and cultural apathy, and donate, 100 and some pounds of tungsten to this cause? You guys, to my surprise, like the next day I had 6 companies say yes.
Wow.
One email, not even conversation. And it was crazy. Like, think about it. They have no ROI. Okay, it's not like people are going to see this hammer and buy more manufacturing parts in a tungsten or heat shields or whatever, right? But they too were founders and started a business at some point and went through a hard time, and so they felt what I was trying to do. They saw the reason, right, the mission, and man, it's happened so many times with different founders. And I ended up choosing a company out of Japan, Nippon Tungsten. They were so amazing to donate it. This huge, like, I have pictures documenting the whole thing. It's so cool. But they made the core, which is made out of tungsten, and then they shipped that to Boston, where the blacksmith actually built the hammer around that and so forth. And then it came here months later. And so we got it done, like built the thing, called Guinness. I was like, hey, got the hammer done. Cool. They're like, okay, we got to get it approved. I'm like, okay, what's that? And they're like, well, it's $10,000. I'm like, what? $10,000? And they're like, yeah, for the expedited whatever. And I had to get this thing done. I wanted to get it done by the Marvel premiere of Infinity War, of Avengers, right? Because I had some contacts over at Marvel and I was working that, but they just couldn't get it done. And anyways, so they got approved in Guinness for their world record. And they're like, yep, it's approved. How heavy is it? I'm like, it's about 140 pounds, 43 pounds or something like that. And they're like, it's not heavy enough. I'm like, what do you mean it's not heavy enough? Like, per square centimeter is the heaviest hammer on the planet. Like, our judges don't feel like it's heavy enough. It has to be at least. And so they gave me like a number, random number. It was like 220 pounds. I don't remember kilos at the time. And I was like, but nobody else has the hammer that heavy. Like, nobody would ever make it. It's the most non-practical thing you would ever do. And I was like, I told you this whole time, documented everything with video, the whole thing I sent to Guinness during the whole process, months and months of content. And then they gave me resistance there. And they're like, well, you can appeal it. And I'm like, I could. And so I talked to them again. And I was like, you guys, like, this is, you knew this was coming, and they dropped the weight down to like 190. And I'm like, there's not a material on earth that you could make a hammer that's 8 inches by 5.5 inches, which is Thor's hammer, right? That would be that heavy. It's impossible. Like uranium is, I think, one of the most heaviest elements, and it still wouldn't be that heavy. So I'm not going to make just a bigger hammer, you know? And so I was very frustrated. I said, I'm about to be on stage with Gary Vee, and this is awesome exposure. I know why you guys exist for your brand. And I was like, it would be a great idea for you to have content with Gary talking about Guinness World Records and lifting the heaviest hammer, instead of me saying how I got hosed by you guys, you know? And I was so frustrated. And at some point I was like, wait a minute, I don't need it. I don't need this. It has nothing to do with my mission. It's just cool. And so I went on and bought the domain. I forget what it was. It was like Galaxy's World Record, Galaxy Records or something like that. I was like, you know what? Elon says we're going to Mars. Screw this world record stuff. Like, I'm bringing Galaxy's heaviest hammer, you know, damn it. And I was so frustrated. I registered it under my own record system.
Nice.
I said I was going to boycott Guinness beer, but I never did. I couldn't do it.
That's funny.
But yeah.
Make your own certifications.
Right, exactly. But that was a huge win for me, you guys. Like, the hammer thing was big. The Gary event was big. Having him lift that thing and talk about mental health, and having Mayo Clinic there in Rochester, Minnesota, it was just like this huge win. For me, it was a confidence booster. But at the time, I was, you know, really building up the education portion of Generation Hero, and had some great partnerships come in, and some great collaborations, and that kind of set things off. Right. And that kind of set the stage for what's happening now. And if it weren't for that win, man, it's tough. You know, when you don't have those wins, it's tough to see clearly or to have patience, you know.
1,000,000%.
Yeah.
I really relate to a lot of the things that you say. Like, I don't think I've ever teared up like this during an interview. Like, ever.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's all good. No, totally.
So tell us okay, so you obviously have this movement, which is Generation Hero. I want to understand, is there a business? Is it a nonprofit? Like, how is it? Like, what is the organization of this? What you got going on?
All right. So because we're talking influencer profits, right? And to own a business, you have to have customers. You know, that was a big thing for me. And for me, it was, you can look at Generation Heroes like the Under Armour for entrepreneurs, right? Like, I wanted a brand that stood for what I stood for. Like, I've been an athlete my whole life, and from kickboxing to bodybuilding to swimming, like all this stuff, right? But Nike and Under Armour didn't speak to me anymore, because that's not who I was. You know, like, I was trying to live my life and do great things and make a difference and make money and all this stuff, inspire people. Where's the brand for that, right? Like, you got Lululemon for fit moms and you know, lifestyle, healthy lifestyle, and Nike, I think, is their thing, and performance is Under Armour's. But where's the brand that speaks to our journey, right? And so that's where I built Generation Hero as that. And so I built complete like clothing line that spoke that. That's why I spent so much time and money on the logo itself, is it had to stand next to the Nikes of the world. I knew the message and the mission was there. So as far as commerce goes, I went brand first this time. I never done that. I'd always gone through like make sales first, make money first, which is usually the smarter way. But in the long term, is building a brand that speaks to people. That story is more important, even if it sucks to go through the dry time. So, you know, I was like, I had the clothing, I had a concept that we have coming out called Wear, which is, it solves the, I won't talk too much about it, but it solves the decision fatigue that we deal with. So there's just a lot of like problem solving. It's like, okay, I can solve this problem and this problem, but fundamentally it's just a brand that has content, that has clothing that speaks to us. And inside of that has education, and of course the movement with the I Am Worthy Project. The money piece was going to physical product, because I had that funding partner I told you about, right? I was like ready to go, had the inventories, you know, all that was ready to go. And then when they fell out, I had to pivot immediately, right? Or my life was like, I would just go under, the thing would go bankrupt. And instead of going in, and this was a big decision, is instead of going and raising more money, because I didn't know that world and I didn't like it, to be frank. I didn't want to sell equity for money. And I knew I had the skill or talent to launch the thing. Like I could sell whatever and I could share this story. And so I was like, all right, not going to raise money. I'm going to launch the digital piece first, the education component. So when the message gets out there about I am worthy, the message gets out there about being your hero, when people ask, how do I do that then? How do I do that? I had the solution with Lifestyle Dynamics and a program called Code 3. And it's just how to live your life between the extremes, how to live better between those extremes. And so I built that. We have that launching by the end of the month, this month, which is super exciting. But it was really just me just going out there and building a digital platform that wasn't just a course, and finding that balance between kind of like coaching and teaching, right? And finding the economics to work on that. And so that's what we've been really working on. And then, of course, we've got all the physical product coming later. But
sweet.
That's awesome.
So do you so you said that obviously you have you in there. Do you have other trainers, people putting in other information, like other coaches and stuff in around the community, or?
So the feeder into Lifestyle Dynamics is something I call Code 3. And it was just really just a framework. Like for me, my story is when I was at rock bottom, I couldn't rely on talent and skill anymore, like I had for years, right? And you guys know this, like when you get to a point and your confidence is low or whatever, like falling back on talent, you second guess yourself. You judge yourself, right? You misjudge yourself, I should say, and you completely mismanage your life. And so for me, it was like when I realized, okay, can't fall back on what I know, I have to win in the aggregate. Like the only way for me to win is to win in the aggregate areas of my life. And so I became very obsessed about, okay, if I can control my time, I've got an advantage. If I can control what I do better than everybody else, I have the advantage. And so I looked at all the different pieces in my life that I could have an advantage. And then I realized that everybody can do this, right? And that's Code 3 is the premise behind Lifestyle Dynamics is we all live on this level playing field, right? And if you've heard the Pareto principle, like 20% of the work will get you 80% of the results, right? It's so important to know that because we look at like a Gary Vee. Like most people, they see Gary, they see this super achieved man worth millions of dollars, skills and talents through the roof because he's built these big companies, right? But when I see Gary, I see this imperfect understanding of where his success came from. And to me, it was he knew how to win. And most people they don't have a marketing problem, a business problem, product problem, a financial problem. They have a winning problem.
You're so right.
Right? And it's because either you win the day or the day wins over you. Okay? And I was working 18 hours. My mentors taught me work ethic and to work 18 hours a day. And that's why I lost my family. And I didn't go on vacations for 12 years. And that's why I was miserable. And I think that is the worst way to build a business. So I was determined to do more in an hour than people could do in a day or even a week. Amen. And so I found all these little things to control my life. It's like if I can make $1,000 an hour or do activities that are worth $1,000 an hour, I wouldn't get sucked into this world of like overwhelm and doing too many things, right? Which most entrepreneurs have. So it didn't matter about skills or talents anymore. I was controlling time. It was crazy. It was just, every piece, like I was like, okay, people spend an hour and a half a day eating and preparing food. I was like, I'm going to cut that down to 30 minutes, right? And I had a plan to do that because then I'm getting an extra hour that nobody else has. You know what I mean? And I would find all these places in my day that people were wasting time. And if I could get that time, I didn't have to work 18 hours. I could work 4 hours a day and accomplish more and get 10 times the results. And so that was really the core of what I was doing. But I had to go through that. And unfortunately, I got stuck because I was like, I'm flawed. I was like, okay, we want to do the easy stuff first, no matter how good the plan is, right? Like you could have a perfect diet. It doesn't mean you're going to eat the food, cook the food, right? So you got to have like these things that help you get past or overcome, as I call it, these flaws, these limitations, the friction. And so I had to create kind of little protocols in my day, such as like one was like if I was sitting more than an hour and a half, I would have to do 100 reps of something, right? So for every hour and a half I would sit, I get up and do, 30 push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, like every hour and a half. And it got me up, it got me exercising, and it actually got me to get back into the gym. Eating, I transferred all that energy of like, oh man, I got to decide what to eat. I got to go shopping. All the time I didn't really have, I saved and I went and got meal delivery. And I was like, okay, now I pay $6.50 for a meal. It takes me 2.5 minutes to cook it, 10 minutes to eat it, right? Like I didn't have to think. I wasn't skipping meals. I was feeling better, solved the problem. And that was everything I built up. And that's, what Code 3 is.
Nice.
I like it.
That's
like
more
people need
activity
that.
hacking.
Yeah,
I
I'm
like it.
all about like biohacking and activity, like productivity hacking. And yeah, totally. I think my burnout, ultimately has brought that same obsession in me. I'm like, rather than push-ups and sit-ups, I'm a big yoga person. I'm not a big, I don't like going to the gym, but I'll roll over onto my yoga mat 3 times a day. I love it.
That's awesome.
Yep.
So you've talked about, so what is your big vision for this company? What do you see this like 5-10 years, Generation Hero and the whole lifestyle dynamics, where do you see this being, or what doing, and how is it looking in the marketplace?
I see Generation Hero will be the largest, the greatest entrepreneurial brand that is out there. And I firmly believe that. In time, it will become something that people can get behind. And it may not seem like it now because we're in the infancy stages of the company, but it will be something where no matter if you're having great wins or losses, you always think of that H, that hero symbol of okay, I have to be my hero today, and what that stands for as an entrepreneur or just as a professional in general. Okay. To me, it's, my mission is to change the game, I guess you could call, right? I've been playing the game for 16 years. Now it's kind of okay, what's your legacy? And it's to really change the game even for a little bit in my way. I'm not a Lewis Howes. I'm not a Gary Vee. I'll never be them. But I have certain qualities and certain things here that I know I can bring to the table that can move the sticks a little bit. Because I do feel like when the economy does turn, and it will, is that people are going to need that foundation. Because when people have to, as I think Gary says this all the time, is when the people that have a status of entrepreneur on their Instagram have to go work at the bank, we don't really understand what mentally that's going to do, especially to these young people. And there should be a foundation that's stronger than that. And that's what I believe Generation Hero can be, and to align with other brands. That's always been my thing, is to always not shortcut our messaging or kind of do something for financial benefit just to get to the market, because I want this brand to be able to stand next to every other large brand out there. It has to, right? It has to complement the Gary V's or the Bransons or whatever, because I need that adoption. And so it's been very careful kind of planning in a way, but at the same time, it's, you got to go to market and you got to sell, and, it'll be fun. I think people enjoy it.
That's sweet.
I really appreciate how you have a vision for something and you just go at it with full force, blinders on, this is what I'm doing, getting it done, no matter how big it seems to anyone else or how crazy it seems to everyone else. This is what I'm doing, and I'm sticking to the core of my beliefs and the vision and the mission, no matter what. So I really want to honor you for that. I think that's an awesome quality to have.
Thank you. It's what you enjoy. I wouldn't do it if I didn't like it. You guys, it's too hard. It's too tough. There's no way. I'd rather be playing in the dirt with my kid.
For sure.
That's why I do this. I do it for everybody else, every dad, every mom, every entrepreneur who wants a better life, obviously, and has a shot, because I do believe, and this is a core belief of mine, and I say this all the time, it's for every Elon and Gary and Branson or Kim Kardashian. There's thousands of other just as talented, just as skilled people that will never get their shot. They'll never get their chance to see their dream realized or whatever, because they can't get past themselves. It's not skill or talent related. It's not opportunity related. It's just there's things going on in their lifestyle dynamics in their life that are preventing them from making it and getting free of that. And so, we edify the greats because it's the American dream, right? And we like to show wins, but we don't like to talk about the 18-hour days, the lonely nights, the failure, the depression, all that stuff, which I do think it has a place to be talked about. But it should also be talked about that it's okay to go on vacation and be an entrepreneur too. It's okay to take a day off.
we have right on our whiteboard, have fun is like on top of it, because like you have to refuel and stuff. So just one last question, because I know this has been amazing, but we ask everybody on the show, it's kind of like my trademark, because like you said, nobody talks about the failures and nobody talks about it's all about the wins and the wins, but I think there's great power in the failures and the darkness, kind of like what we mentioned. But so overall, I mean, you've had a ton of experience, and I'm sure there's not just like one, but is there one that just sticks out to you, like one failure that you've gone through, and then how you picked yourself? Like, what do you think the worst of the worst failure, and then how have you picked yourself up from it?
The worst failure was, it had nothing to do with business. It was just failure as a man. And that's what hit me probably the hardest. And it wasn't any specific thing that happened, but it's when I realized I was failing as a human, as a man. And that was when, in my previous relationship, I was struggling because I was trying to find my new way, right? Like I was trying to build this vision, and I didn't know how, even though I had all this skill, this was new territory, and I was struggling mentally with it. And I remember seeing in the other person, my spouse at the time, like it wasn't anything she said, it wasn't anything she did. It was just a look in her eye of like, I don't think you can do this, right? Like it was like you traded that for me kind of thing. And I never, ever wanted that to happen. Even I like promised myself, like I never wanted to sacrifice or to compromise my relationships. But at the same time, like we become so obsessed with where we're going and what we're doing and our missions or whatever. And it did take hold of my life. Like it literally handicapped me as a person, as a man. And when I saw that, and I don't know if it was, I don't believe in you, but that's how I took it, right? Like you're failing. I don't know. You might want to go get a job kind of thing, right? Like, I don't know if you can do this. Shouldn't you? Like it was question, it was doubt. And I've never seen doubt. And when you doubt yourself and then you have other influences in your life, like that to me crushed me more than anything. And when that was gone, and when I lost them and other things, I remember I was laying on the floor in my basement in my studio, and I was looking up at the ceiling, and my best friend had passed away. She had passed away about 8 months prior. And I was like completely doing a Top Gun moment. I was like, talk to me, Goose. I was like, just talk to me here. Like, and I just realized like none of that mattered. What mattered is what I currently have, like where I am at my current state, where I go from here. I knew what I was worth. And at the same time, I got this crazy award last year, and I had a hard time accepting it. It was, God, I can't remember the name of it, but it was the JC's award. It was an achievement award. And I know John F. Kennedy won it, and a bunch of very famous people. And so like when I got it, it was for like my work with the I Am Worthy Project. And I'm like, I haven't even started yet. Like I didn't feel worthy to get that award yet. I'm representing the very concept of being good enough. And it was a friend of mine said, Chris, you need to stand up and accept this because you are good enough. That's what this is all about. And when I was on stage accepting the award, it was interesting because every person, there's a few people that got that award as well. And they all said like, this isn't for me. I don't deserve it. Like it was just kind of this very humbling message that came from everybody. And it's not wrong. It's just at the same time, we have to believe in ourselves that we know what we're doing, and it's important. It's important to us, and that's all that matters. And that we follow through that. We not get influenced by social media or Facebook or any of these other places, right? Or parents or our friends. It's just you do what you do it well, fail well, as I call it, and you're gonna make it because you'll have the wins, and they're that much better. You guys are like my wins now are like amazing compared to what they used to be, right? Like there's no ring you could give me, no check you could write that would make me feel how I feel when I have a win, when, we make an impact or we launch something. So that would be, failure as a man, I think was the hardest, and then overcoming that just by believing again, that's all.
I love it.
That's awesome. Thank you
for really sharing. So I'm inspired as hell. I know like we are all capable of doing incredible things. Where can people go from here to learn more about you, to learn about Generation Hero, to be a part of the movement? Where can we send them?
You can go to generationhero.com. That will be up, I know, in 2 weeks. The final site finally is getting down. We're super excited for that. You'll also be able to go to iamworthy.org, where you see we're doing a campaign starting next month. So you'll see the new site next month. I think that'll be up in next week, but it's called Road to 1 Million, where we're selling shirts, special edition Gary Vaynerchuk shirts. Actually, it's WAF. It's worthy as fuck is the message. But because when I did the event with Gary, I was like, I can't give him a shirt that says I'm worthy. Like, Gary would never say that. It's like, what would Gary Vaynerchuk say? So I created a logo called WAF, right? 'Cause I was like, yeah, that's what he would say. So, create a whole brand around that so people can buy a shirt for $27. 100% of the profits for the sales go towards the movement to build this, to share it, to spread it, to grow it. And our goal is to raise $1 million for this campaign. So the iamworthy.org site will direct that.
That's awesome.
Perfect. I kind of want one.
Maybe
Totally
we have to get two.
Right.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
Cool. Chris, thank you so much. I truly appreciate you and coming on today. So that's it. I think
we're good. No, that's it.
Cool. All right,
Awesome.
guys. Until next time.
Thanks, guys.